Former Derby County manager Paul Warne looks set for a potential interview with Barnsley FC. Now, over the course of the last few months, Barnsley sacked their manager and gave Conor Hourihane the interim role. Now, obviously for Barnsley, they've been challenging for promotion out of League One, and this season just hasn't quite gone to plan. And for me, it's one of those where you have to give Barnsley the benefit of the doubt. Now, we're going to talk about Paul Warne a little bit more in this video because I actually think this could be a really good move for Barnsley. Now, you obviously look at the squad of players that they've got and the way they've played this season and over the course of the last 5 to 10 years really, where they've sort of been in that sort of 3-4-3, 3-5-2 formation, and for me that suits Paul Warne absolutely perfectly. Now, I'm not saying that this Barnsley side is going to break the bank in League One and going to absolutely dominate the league next season, but if you look at the team that they actually have and the team they put out against Cambridge just a couple of days ago, you look at the lineup and you think that actually isn't a bad side for League One, and that could certainly challenge for promotion. You look at players like Donovan Pines, you look at Connell in midfield, Davis, Kyler Dunn. Like, they've got some really good players in their lineup, and when you look at Paul Warne and what Paul Warne would want to do with this Barnsley side, then I think he's in a good stead if he was to go in at Barnsley, because he can play with a back three. He can play with a midfield five if he wants to. You look at the likes of, is it Ashley Phillips, one of the central midfielders who they can... Adam Phillips, sorry, one of the central midfielders who can go in that number 10 role behind two strikers. And you think they've got a really good opportunity with a Paul Warne to be able to move forward. Now, if we look at the league table, Barnsley are actually overperforming where they should be. They're currently sitting 11th place. They should sit in 12th. They have one more point than they should, have scored 5 more goals than they should, but have conceded 6 more than they should have. Now, over the course of the last 5 matches, it's not been great for Barnsley. 1 win, 1 defeat and 3 losses. Their away form has been really good this season. 10 wins, 8 losses and 1 draw. You go to the home form and that's where it struggles. 20th place, 5 wins, 7 draws and 7 defeats. Now, for me, I'm not going to say that Paul Warne is the answer to all the problems at Barnsley, because as I've said numerous times across the course of this season as a Derby County fan, Paul Warne is not the answer to any team that wants to become stable in the Championship over the course of the next 5 years. But for a team that's trying to get out of League One, he is absolutely the right call. Now, they aren't that far away from the playoffs, in complete and total honesty. It's 7 points with, I think, 9 games left in League One, which, for me, like, it's not easy to overturn that gap, but it's certainly possible. Now, if I'm Paul Warne, though, I'm not wanting to take over today. I'm sort of looking at taking over towards the end of the season. Now, they obviously parted company with Darryl Clark earlier this month, who was in charge for, I believe, around 9 to 10 months. And they've not necessarily been the worst team in the league, but they've also not been the greatest. And they were sort of battling in and around the playoffs recently, but obviously, as of more recently, 3 defeats in a row, and suddenly you sort of fall out of that picture. Now, obviously, Conor Hourihane stepped in I think it's just their most recent game. He's done 2 games, sorry, my apologies. A draw and a defeat. And in a sense, I feel bad for Conor Hourihane. I know that his end goal is to be a manager or a coach, but I just think he's been sort of thrown in at the deep end at a team that's trying to push for promotion, and he sort of like doesn't necessarily have the tools to do that. Now, for me, there is some good players in this Barnsley squad. Like I mentioned earlier, I really like Phillips. I really like Connell. I think Davis, Kyler Dunn is a really good League One player. Jonathan Russell, another good player in League One. I quite like Donovan Pines. And it's one of those for me where they just haven't quite turned up when they needed to. Like, it's all well and good, and we can say this time and time again with Derby County back when they were in League One. They spent the vast majority of their first League One season in the playoffs, but when it mattered, that last 10 to 15 games absolutely crumbled in the first season and ended up finishing 7th. Barnsley are sort of in a similar position. They've been in and around the playoffs for a majority of the season, and ultimately now they're 8 points away from the playoff places with Huddersfield Town. And there's really only one place going unless Charlton and Stockport sort of go on a really bad run, which, can we see it happening? Potentially. But it's one of those for me where, if I'm Paul Warne, you look at a Barnsley, you look at a Rotherham United, you look at a Posh, a Peterborough, and there is potential opportunities for him to go back in at League One over the course of the next few months. And I do believe that any League One job is a good League One job, and I think anybody who wants to get promoted out of League One, go for Paul Warne. And then you look at what potential opportunities he could have already, because if he goes in at Barnsley, he already knows Conor Hourihane, who's going to be a coach, and he'll have a good understanding of the players that are already at Barnsley because of the amount of times they've played each other, Paul Warne and Barnsley, over the course of the last 3 years. So it's one of those where there's certain opportunities available for Paul Warne now where I think he could go in and next season get them straight out of the division. Now, obviously, they're going to need investment in the summer. They're going to need new players. And I think a first start for Paul Warne could be looking at former club Derby County and what players are out of contract there. You look at a Liam Thompson. You look at Joe Ward's not out of contract but certainly could be available in the summer. He may potentially look at Connor Washington. You've got... there's so many players at Derby County who I still think have quality to perform at League One level, and that's what Paul Warne could do should he get this opportunity at Barnsley. Now, obviously he could go in now. I'm not saying he will do. I'm not saying he won't. That's not a decision that I want to sort of hold my hands up to. But he could go in at Barnsley now and get them promoted. It's possible. It is very possible. We've seen it at times, teams make that last dying run. Now, obviously, 3 defeats in a row and a draw versus Cambridge isn't necessarily the right way to get going. But up next, they have Wigan Athletic, and they're currently sitting in 18th place. I think they're 6 points away or 7 points away from the drop zone. So there's an opportunity for them. But if you do look at sort of the League One table, you've got Huddersfield, who are on 61, and you probably go down to probably Stevenage for teams who could get in the playoffs depending on a big run. And obviously if Charlton and Stockport sort of continue the form they've been on this season, they should be perfectly fine. Wycombe Wanderers are battling it out with Wrexham for that second promotion place, automatic. So it's a very tight league, and obviously you've got 20 points between 20th place and 6th, which I think is unbelievable. That is really tight in my opinion. And there's always the opportunity in League One to battle for the playoffs. If you look at sort of Birmingham City as a no-brainer, they're going up because they've got 2 games in hand and they're 9 points clear. You then sort of look at you've got Leyton Orient, Reading, Bolton's, Huddersfield, who all have a game in hand, so could potentially be 3 points further away from Barnsley. It's a difficult conversation for the Barnsley fans to have, and the discussion that they could potentially be having around Paul Warne, because Paul Warne's record in League One is top. It is top tier. Paul Warne is the League One Guardiola. Derby County fans have sung it for the 2 years that he was there, but he's not more than that. And that's where the conversation should start really at board level for me, is if you're wanting to go up and challenge at that next level, you've got to be able to sort of have a manager who can do both. And I just don't think that Paul Warne has the capability or the quality for the Championship. Now, obviously, as Derby fans, Barnsley fans, whoever is watching this video, let me know your thoughts on Paul Warne to Barnsley down in the comments. I think it is a potential deal that could happen. I think it sort of opens the door for Paul Warne to go to sort of a mid-sized club that's not quite the size of Derby County. It's not quite as small as Rotherham, and they could potentially go on to bigger and better things. Obviously, just a few years ago, we're challenging the playoffs in the Championship. So let me know your thoughts down below. If you have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell, hit the like button as well, and I'll catch you in my next video.